Hello and welcome everyone to Organize Everything, Discovering and Utilizing SharePoint Lists. This is one of my favorite areas of SharePoint because it's one of those areas that people don't even really know exists, and it's very easy to use, and we're going to walk you through some of those common things today. By the way, my name is Nate Austin. I'll be presenting today and sharing the content, and behind the scenes we have Stephanie Kingsley producing. So real quick, some quick takes that we like to hit on. So these are the things you're going to take away from this session today on discovering and utilizing SharePoint lists. Lists for tracking issues. A very common thing with meetings is trying to track issues and parking board items, things like that. Checking in and checking out resources or allocating whether or not resources are in use or available to be used or to be checked out, as well as lists for common communication and references. We'll go through several different instances of these different examples and show you real live examples of all these different scenarios, and we'll show you how to set them up for yourself and see some of the capabilities and features. So with that said, here's the agenda today. The purpose of this session, we really want to increase awareness of SharePoint lists and how they function and some of the different problems they might be able to help you solve. You might not even realize you have problems that they can solve because you haven't really known that this is such an easy tool to be able to use. So we're going to really quick do a summary of some of the common business problems that we know SharePoint lists can help solve. And there's different nuances to those different problems, and they always apply to different organizations in different ways. So we'll hopefully give you some ideas and ways in which you might be able to apply lists to some of the common challenges you might have. The biggest part of the conversation today is going to be the demonstration. We're going to show you several different examples of demo data, as well as some data that we use here at Mytech, as well as then how to create a list and add lists and integrate it into Teams. Because that's one of the things I love about 365 is that SharePoint and Teams work so well together. It makes it easy to access the information depending on where you're at. So we're going to show you that too. And then at the end, of course, we'll open it up for Q&A and action items that we'd like you to or suggest. A couple housekeeping items really quick is there is a Q&A panel. If you have questions throughout the session, by all means, please put those in there. We'd love to answer those at the end. And Stephanie sometimes is able to answer those offline, but we always open it up at the end for questions. And I'm happy to go deeper and dig deeper in any of these details at the end. But we're going to go through the content and give the primer first for the first 25, 30 minutes. Then we'll open it up for some Q&A. Before we dig into the content, I always like to say 1 minute about Mytech. We are a business and technology consulting organization that works with small and medium businesses. We've been in business for 20 years, and we've learned a few things about a proven IT strategy that we know delivers consistent and reliable results for our clients. So ultimately, we believe our clients want to remove IT challenges, and together, ultimately removing out those IT challenges, you can focus on serving your customers or clients better, and ultimately be more adaptable to the business challenges that we all face running an organization. And together we can help you achieve 4 times more value and productivity from your IT investments. I know that's not why you're here today. If you'd like to have a conversation about how that works and how we can help you, please raise your hand. We'd love to chat. Otherwise, let's dig into the content. SharePoint lists. What are some of the common problems they can solve? So one of the most common ways in which we see SharePoint lists used, but I'm going to spend most of the time not talking about this, but we will illustrate it briefly, which is when files could exist in multiple folders. The way we see this playing out in different organizations when we have conversations with them is that they might have a file that could live in folder A or folder B, and what ends up happening is that someone puts that file in folder A, and then the next person that saves it might put it in folder B because they think it should go in folder B. And now you have multiple copies of the same information in different folders because one mind works a little bit differently than another. So we're going to show you how lists might be able to help you solve that problem. There's also ways in which you can track the approved status of information, whether it be documents or assets, as well as like checked out or checked in statuses. These are things that SharePoint lists can help you do. There's even some approval processes that you can implement. We're not going to get into the automation and some of the approval processes, but you can layer on approval processes to some of this SharePoint lists as well. One of the other common ways in which we see lists being used is to keep track of meeting issues or parking board topics. When you have a meeting, you don't always get to every issue in every meeting. And so what's the way in which you kind of allow those issues to persist or exist meeting to meeting so that you can keep track of them and you don't lose them, as well as enabling your team members to add items to that list whenever the topic comes up. So we'll show you some ways in which lists can help you solve that problem. Asset management is another one, depending on, some people have asset management tools like Mytech. Some of the tools we use to help manage our clients, asset management's built in, so we don't use it for asset management, but this might be a way in which you could easily do some asset management for your own organization, depending on what you're hoping to accomplish. One of the other common ways in which we see lists used from a marketing perspective is publishing and sharing that information internally, not necessarily externally like to your public website, but internally sharing that information so that the rest of your team knows what kind of information you have and how to find the right kind of information based on the information you'd like to share externally with potential prospects or clients or vendors. Finally, I also love how lists gives you multiple ways in which you can search different resources by type or function or filter. List naturally creates that environment to allow you to find information quickly, even if you're not sure what you're looking for, the specifics of what you're looking for, you just know a little bit about what you're looking for. And we'll illustrate all those capabilities through the demonstration. So I'm hoping that at least one of those, these common problems that we just mentioned here are ones that can resonate with you so that you can think about how these using SharePoint lists can apply to your organization. So let's start by digging into the demonstration. I am going to start by I'm going to use an example of a board of directors. Now, I know if you're a for-profit organization, very few for-profit organizations have a formal board of directors, but if you're a nonprofit, this is a very common problem that you have, is keeping track of documents as well as potentially their approved status or not. So here I have an example of a document library which is also using SharePoint lists. So SharePoint lists is really, when you talk about it, using things like metadata or criteria or attributes that describe the information or like to help you filter and categorize the content. So for instance, very common in a board of directors, you might have multiple different board meeting items. But this way, if I wanted to search, I just want to look for the board of directors meeting and agenda items or any items for 2022. So now very quickly, instead of having a long list of information, I can just look for the information from this year. But also if I want to look for information from last year, because I can then quick search and go to last year as well. One of the other things I like to be able, relative to board of directors documents, is there's typically a formal approval process that we have to go through. So I'm going to illustrate what that looks like. So for example, I'm going to just open this up and not filter. I'm going to clear the filters here. And really quickly, I can see that here are the items that need approval. So for instance, if I'm trying to come to my board meeting and I'm looking for the documents, these are the documents that I need to approve. So I'll give you an example of something, how to edit this. So I'm going to hit this edit in grid view. It's one of my favorite ways to edit lists. It's right here at the top. Click edit in grid view, and now all these become available. And under the need to vote, let's say we just voted on this and we've approved the minutes from the last meeting, I can just move it to approved. You could also implement some sort of workflow, for example, but this is probably a more likely way in which you might use this in a board of directors scenario. And let's say we've approved the budget, but we've tabled the strategic plan because it maybe needs some more work. And then I can come up here and hit exit grid view again, and now it saves that information. Of course, I just filtered by need to vote, and so that filter is no longer applicable. So I'm going to click back, and you'll see that that I've been able to go back to that information. Of course, I should hit refresh here, so those statuses get updated. There we go. So now you can see there's nothing that's left in the need to vote category. But also, this is where you can search for document type, like agenda and minutes versus budget. These are just examples of how I've seen this apply to a board of directors. But I wanted to illustrate how it's very quickly and easy by using the edit and grid view in the way in which you can manage document types, as well as document statuses, as well as document maybe criteria like year. These are some common ways that you can apply SharePoint lists. The other thing that, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll illustrate this also in one of the other sections that we'll discuss, is sometimes when I mentioned that if files could possibly live in multiple folders, well, this is an example of what if you had a 2020 folder, an approved folder, or an agenda and minutes folder. Well, this document here could live in, maybe this is the parent folder, and this could be two subsets of the folder. So now this document, do you put this in the approved folder, or do you put this in the agenda and minutes folder? So this is an example where SharePoint lists can allow you to have multiple attributes applied to a single document so that you don't get a copy of the document in multiple places. So that's one of the ways in which we also see SharePoint lists helping when it comes to document management. So this is one of the most common ways we see SharePoint lists used today. But I'm really going to focus more on the other aspects of SharePoint lists. So I'm going to do an illustration of issue discussion. So imagine that you're having a team meeting, whether it be a quarterly planning meeting or a weekly team meeting or a monthly meeting, whatever the frequency is that you're meeting your team or group of people meet, and show there's issue and discussion topics. So one of the things that I like to share, this is how you can have these items persist. And notice we have a category here that talks about whether it's open or completed, or it's a parking board item. So if I'm starting my meeting and we're ready to have the discussion part of our agenda, I can come down here and say, I actually saved a view, open items. So I'm going to click on open items. And basically, I saved a filtered set, so it filters by anything that's listed as open. And so now we can have our meeting discussion, and we can identify, again, I can come up here and hit edit in grid view, and I can say, all right, we talked about this one. What did we agree? I'll say SK is, that's Stephanie. Stephanie is going to coordinate date and time for happy hour. Right, so that can be the agreement, and we can say this item is now completed. Okay. The other thing we can do sometimes is that thing I don't want to forget. Well, maybe we talk about this, and you can have a longer description like this is to give me more details about that thing I don't want to forget. So you can put more information, customize all these fields, because that happens sometimes when someone puts up here that thing you don't want to forget, and then they get to it and they don't remember what it is you want to talk about. So give yourself a little extra longer description to be able to figure that out. But let's say we identify this as a parking board item and that we're going to bring this up in our next planning meeting, whether it be our quarterly or annual planning. And so I'm actually going to hit this and I'm going to move it to parking board. Now that we've had our discussion, I'm going to say exit in grid view. And so now, because I've applied that filter, I only have one item here that for our next meeting that is now on our list. But this also allows anyone on the team to come in and add a new list or a new item whenever they'd like. So that's one of the things I like about using lists, is because the supervisor or manager or facilitator of the meeting no longer has to be the one to procure, or that's not the word I'm looking for, curate the list of things to discuss. Instead of getting an email and then having them to remember to bring it up in the next weekly meeting, anyone on the team can go in here and add an issue that they would like to discuss, put their name to it, and that way they don't have to put the burden again on that facilitator or supervisor or manager. One of the other things I wanted to show you and illustrate this is I wanted to do a filter. So I'm going to hit the filter. You can hit this little drop down here, and I'm going to filter by, I'm going to hit clear all first of all. I have to go back to all items, excuse me. I have to go back to all items since I have that filter in place. What I want to do is I'm going to come in here and hit filter by, and I want to filter by the parking board. Because now I want to say we're coming to our quarterly planning meeting, and I want to look at our parking board items. And now I can look, we have these 2 items on our parking board. The other thing I'd like to do, so to minimize the amount of clicks I have to use in order to get to this filtered list, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come over here to all items, and there's this option called Save View As, and then I can call this view parking board items. So now I can save that. And so when I come back in the future, notice it's named this view as parking board items, and it allows me more quickly and easily to have multiple different custom views. So if I wanted to quickly navigate to open items, I can do that there. If I want to quickly navigate to parking board items, I can do that there. And if I want to go back to all items and I want to see things that are even completed, I can do that there. So it's a quick and easy way to not lose information, but also be able to filter. You can have custom views. You can set those views as default. But this is one of the ways I really like managing through like issue discussion, parking board topics, which is a very common theme for nearly any group of people or department that function together, is being able to have something like this. I'm also want to illustrate really quick by going over to Teams. Notice I'm in the marketing team, which is the same place I was at. One of the ways in which I like to make quick and easy access to that list is I'm going to hit this little plus icon. If you're not familiar with that, this is where you can add different apps. And oftentimes you have to be an owner of the team in order to do this. So if you're not an owner of a team, you might not see that plus icon. But I'm going to hit SharePoint Lists, and it's going to require me to save it. So it kind of adds it into the team. So I'm going to do that. And then once, so it's saving it and creates a tab at the top, and it gives me the opportunity to create a list or add an existing one. For the sake of this discussion, I want to add the list that we were just working on. So I'm going to say add existing list. And notice it's going to give me the list that it's only going to give me the lists that are available to this team. So I could have lots of lists across different teams in the organization, but because I'm within the marketing team, it's only going to give me the list that's based on this team. So I can hit that. And now that same issue and discussion list that we were just working on is here, and those same filters that allow me to filter by open or filter by parking board are also right here too. And then, but if I don't like this view, I can also very quickly and easy hit these little breadcrumbs, and I can open this up right in SharePoint. So that gives you an example of how quickly and easily it allows you to navigate between Teams and SharePoint. I'll show a little bit more on that later as far as creating a new list inside of Teams. But now I'd like to move on to talking a little bit more about operations. So I'm going to get into operations and say, what if you have like an asset tracking need to keep track of the different devices that you're working on? So I actually used a template to create this list, and I'm going to show you how to add something to this list really quick. I'm going to hit new, and this list in particular allows me to add a device image. As you can see, there's device images here. So I'm going to add an image. I'm going to go to pictures, and I have a picture of a Teams room device, so that's going to go there. I'm going to just call it Teams room 1, very creative, and I'll say that it's in use because it's already in function. I'll say Yealink is the manufacturer. And what I like about this too is it allows you to add, if you type in something new, it allows you to dynamically add items to the list that eventually then get added to your dropdown. Model, I'll just say it's the 870. I don't even know if that's the right number, but you get the idea. And I'll say it's an accessory. So it allows you to, and you can customize all this. I just use the defaults from this list to illustrate the point. It's kind of a black silver. I'll just say silver. Serial numbers, whatever the serial number is, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 1. And I can choose a purchase date so I can get an idea of that asset management. Let's say it was March 1st of this year. And then I can put a purchase price in. So let's say it's $2,500, whatever the price is, and I can add more information. And if there's a current owner of this device, you can add that here too. It's not really applicable to this because this goes into a conference room. So I'm not going to put an owner, and then I'm going to save it. So now what happens is you see this new asset gets added, shows in use. But the other thing I wanted to show you to illustrate, let's say I'm someone that needs another monitor. So I can go to the asset tracking and say, hey, are there any monitors available here? Because one of mine died, or I want to add a second monitor to my workstation. So I can come up here and hit edit and grid view. I'm going to, instead of making this available, I'm going to say it's in use. And then I'm going to scroll over here on this monitor one, and I'm going to say the current owner, I'm going to say it's Stephanie. I'm picking on Stephanie today. So Stephanie is going to be the current owner of this device. Once I've done that, I can hit exit grid view, and it saves it. And now it notes that the monitor is in use, and it shows that Stephanie is the one using it. So this is a simple example. And again, Mytech, we don't use this because we have other software tools because of the nature of what we do for asset management. But this is something, and it might give you a way to track different assets. This could be, we had an organization, a dealership that used this to check in and check out their rental vehicles that they used, or their loaner vehicles. We've had this for other types of trucks or equipment that get checked out that might be managed from a construction organization, for example. So these are different ways you can think of asset tracking relative to using a SharePoint list that'll give shared visibility, as well as you can keep track of who was the last person that had it. You can build some approval processes in here as well if you'd like. But this is an example of how you can use asset tracking via a template from a SharePoint list. All right, so now I'm going to so these are all demo environment stuff. Now I want to show you a couple in production items that Mytech uses internally. And so this talks about marketing, communication, and sharing of information. Very often, the marketing department or marketing team or individual in an organization is responsible for creating and publishing content, whether it be social content, blog content, events like this, for example. And the problem is, though, not everyone in the organization is as intimately familiar with all that information and what's available. So let's say if I'm trying to work with the client and they're interested in information about budgeting, I can come here and hit this filter and say, I want to filter by anything that's listed with budgeting. So now I have a few items that are listed with budgeting, and then it tells me one's a case study and a couple of these are blogs. So that's a couple of different, that's one of the ways in which I can, your team can create a list like this, share it with your organization, and allow them to self-serve this information and search and find this information, instead of having to ask your marketing team every time they're trying to find something, hey, do we have any content that has budgeting in it, or strategic planning, or can you show me the list of blogs that you have? Those are the kind of things that this can really help with, as it's very common when we worked with different organizations. If they have any marketing department whatsoever, this is almost always a challenge that they struggle with, as far as enabling people on their team to filter and find information that they can use, whether they be sharing it with a prospect or an existing customer or client, and or with a potential vendor. So this is an example that we like to illustrate relative to marketing. Let's see here. And then the last one I wanted to show before I get into creating a list and giving you the example of that, is one of the things that we find, and I know there are a lot of other organizations that have this challenge too, is that we want to be able to provide references and resources to our clients that are outside of the scope of what we do. So we call that our Mytech networking ecosystem. And we want anyone on our team, if they're having a conversation with a client, and let's say a client says, hey, I really want to shop for, or I'm frustrated with my cyber liability insurance. Do you have any resources that might be able to that I might be able to talk to from a cyber liability perspective? Again, that's not what we do, but it's related to the kind of work we do. So I'll give you an example of how you can just come up here. I'm going to use the search function at this time, and I'm just going to search cyber, just to give you an example, and I'm going to hit enter. So now notice that I just did a search for cyber, not knowing whether or not, of course I did know that we had these, but not knowing if we necessarily have a resource of that type. Now I have 3 different organizations that showed up in our list, who they are, information about them, where they serve potentially, and who internally might be able to introduce me to those folks on our team. So this is just an example of how to, again, enable you sharing across different team members, potentially across the organization, to help find resources that are not where you don't necessarily know the name of the company. Because if I know the name of the company, I'll just look up the company. But if you're just saying, I'm a company that does X, whether it be Power BI or cyber insurance or ERP software, or et cetera. Again, whatever that might be in your world. But this is an example that I found that works really well to help make sure that our team is able to share different available resources for the needs of our clients that are outside of what we do. And so I like to illustrate that these are just examples of how that might apply to your world. Okay, so now I want to show you how to create a list. So I'm going to go back to our demo environment, and I just picked one of our teams that doesn't have a list yet on it. So and really, in order to get to the list, you have to go to the home. The easy way to do is go to the home page of the site. Because if you're in the document section, because sometimes when you go to SharePoint through Teams, it'll get you to the document section. That's one of the easiest ways to get there. But the problem is, if you click New here, it's not going to give me the option to create a list, right? It's because I'm in the document library. So if I want to create a list in the site, I have to be on the Home tab, which is just a little tip. And then when you're there, and again, you have to have the right permissions to be able to do this. So it's not necessarily available to everyone. But if you're an owner of a team or an admin, you will have the ability to do this. And you click New, and the first item here is a SharePoint list. So what I like to show here is that, and I'm not going to go through all the details of it, but Microsoft provides some basic templates that are available. And the weird thing is, I'll illustrate this in Teams right after this, is when you pull up this in Teams, it actually shows a few more options. I have no idea why, but I'll show you that here in a moment. But here's an example, and you could click on one of these. I'm just going to click on Issue Tracker, similar to that topic that I talked about if running a team meeting, for example. And it'll give you a preview of the list. So you can see, and it gives you kind of some illustrations of some of the fields that will automatically be created. Now you can customize all these very easily, and I'll quickly show you that as well. But you can customize all these different types of list items, and then you could also preview. I'm going to preview employee onboarding. Again, it gives you some illustrations and custom tabs, event itinerary. How do you want this to look? So this is all available, and you should be able to, you could see this yourself if you just clicked on New List, and you could choose to use a template. The other thing you can do, and I haven't played with this a lot candidly, is if you want to import from Excel. If you're already doing something like this tracking wise, you could import it from an Excel list that you might already have built out. So if this is something you've been doing in Excel, try it and see if what importing from Excel does. And either way, you can customize it once you're done, or you'd of course start with a blank list. So I'm not going to go through all that right now because we already have some lists to work through, but I'm going to go back really quick to the marketing team issues and discussions because I wanted to illustrate also how you can customize a field. And then the last thing I'm going to show you is how to do this inside of Teams. So notice when you have, again, I customize this and you have all these different fields. At the end, you see add column. So down here, and you just click on this, and this is where you can choose what kind of information do you want. Do you want it to be a date field? Do you want it to be a person? Like, so for instance, this is a person field. This one is a date field. This one is a choice field. So like I could use choice. Again, I could make it a hyperlink so that the field will be expecting a hyperlink format. You could use currency, etc. So basically, you can identify the different ways that you want to customize your list. Single line of text is what the title is using. Multiple lines of text is what the longer description is using. So these are ways in which you can customize that. But if you already have a column that you want to customize, you can also, I'm going to just choose here, say category of issue. I'm going to come down here to column settings, and this is how you can edit an existing column. So when you click that, it pulls up the items. This is where I could add a choice or I could remove a choice if I wanted to. And then I could also choose whether or not I want to make it required or allow multiple selections or not. Because sometimes under choice, you want to allow multiple selections, as we showed in the marketing sharing of content. But this is how you can edit existing columns. You can add a column and customize it, or again, you can click on the little drop down. You can come down to column settings and hit edit, and that's where you can edit the existing column settings. So relatively easy and simple and very easy to customize. So the last thing, as I said, I'm going to show you is that I wanted to illustrate is coming down to the guest access team, and I want to show the plus icon again. If you notice, I already added an existing list, so I'm going to add lists again. It's going to make me save it to add it into the channel or the team itself. And here, remember when I mentioned it shows you more options when you're in Teams? It does. It shows you, oh, sorry, I want to go back. I don't want to use an existing one. I want to go back. Sorry about that. I want to create a list, not add an existing. Sorry. So notice it actually gives me a couple more options here when I view this instead of what it does when I'm in SharePoint. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. But this is an example where you could also do the same thing, and you could choose to add a list here as well. So you can view it in Teams. You can view it in SharePoint. If you have it in SharePoint, as I mentioned here with the marketing channel, as this list will pop up here, the issue discussion topic list. If I want to, I can just really quickly go to SharePoint, and it pops it open in SharePoint too. So really great Teams and SharePoint integration. There's some slight nuances that you see. For instance, when you try and create a list in Teams, it gives you a couple different template options. Again, I don't know why, but that is at a high level is some of the illustrations of how you can use SharePoint lists, as well as hopefully how you can create using from a template or create and add into a Teams environment. So some of the quick takeaways from a SharePoint list summary. Look, you can organize different types of information. A lot of people are already using lists for documents, but there's lots of other kinds of information that you can use to share with your team or filter and search to enable your team to find information faster. Again, you can use templates, you can import from Excel, or you can customize it from scratch. And there's a lot of unique business challenges that you can solve where you can maybe take paper processes or manual processes and build them into SharePoint lists, and you can layer on some automation as well. Ultimately, our hope for you is that by creating lists, making it easier to search and filter, and being able to do some SharePoint and Teams integration, is that you can enable your team to make fewer clicks to get their job done. Ultimately, that's what we're trying to accomplish is let's do more what we're supposed to do as opposed to the clicks that it takes us to get there. So thank you very much. Join us for future events. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on LinkedIn. Love you to join us for future events at mytech.com/events. We always publish these about a quarter at a time, so Q2 is fully published. If there's anyone that you're aware of that might be able to benefit from some of this information, please feel free to share it. We want to enable self-service for folks to be able to improve their operational efficiency and make it easier for their team to function. We also host, for the more technical folks that are interested, every other month we host a Power User Group session, which digs a little bit more into the design and the technical nuances of how 365, SharePoint, and Teams are designed to work together. With that said, thank you all for attending. Appreciate your time for whether you are watching live or watching after the fact. But now we'll close it down and open it up for questions.